Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Eric Marquette, here with Paul Natopsky. And Paul, I want to kick off today by looking at a piece of administrative history that quietly rewrote how the entire defense sector handles data. If you go back before 2010, the executive branch was basically a wild west of ad hoc markings. You had FOUO, LOU, SBU, just this chaotic patchwork of labels that made sharing information across agencies an absolute nightmare.
An absolute nightmare is putting it mildly, Eric. It was an operational bottleneck. In November of 2010, President Obama signed Executive Order 13556, which officially established the Controlled Unclassified Information Program. The goal was simple but massive: sweep away all those proprietary, agency specific silos and replace them with a single, uniform federal standard.
And that high-level mandate eventually trickled down to 32 CFR Part 2002, which is the actual regulatory engine room of the CUI program, managed by the National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA.
Right. Under 32 CFR Part 2002, NAR acts as the executive agent. They created the centralized CUI registry, which is the sole authority on what categories exist. Agencies cannot just invent their own. But the real shift for defense contractors happened when the Pentagon took these federal rules and operationalized them through DoD Instruction 5200.48 in March of 2020. That instruction established the DoD CUI registry and set a hard baseline.
A hard baseline, meaning under DoDI 5248, any information categorized as CUI basic has to be protected at a minimum of a moderate confidentiality impact level under FIPS Pub 199.
Exactly. FIPS 199, moderate confidentiality. That is a very specific technical bar. If you're a contractor, you can't just treat this like ordinary corporate email anymore. And it completely changed the physical and visual landscape of these documents. The old for official use only, or FOUO stamp, is dead.
It is completely gone. Now, if you have an unclassified document containing CUI, you must have a standardized CUI banner and footer at the top and bottom of every single page. No more guessing.
Well, not just the banner and footer. DoDI 5200.48 also requires a CUI designation indicator block on the first page or cover. It has to list who controlled it, the specific CUI category, the applicable distribution statement or limited dissemination controls, and a point of contact. If you don't have those exact lines, you are out of compliance.
That is a great bridge into how this intersects with actual technical drawings and engineering data. Because when you talk about unclassified military tech, you're usually dealing with controlled technical information, or CTI, which is a major subcategory of CUI. And this is where we have to look at the relationship between DoDI 5248 and the older military data control regimes, specifically DOHD Directive 5232.5 and DOHD Instruction 5230.24.
This is a critical distinction. DoDD 5230.25, which governs the withholding of unclassified technical data from public disclosure, was established all the way back in 1984. It is anchored in federal law under 10 U.S.C. Section 140C. It gives the Secretary of Defense the statutory authority to withhold technical data with military or space application that cannot be exported without an export license under ITAR or the EAR.
So, the Pentagon has had the authority to lock down this technical data for decades, but how do they actually verify who is allowed to receive it? That's where DD Form 2345 comes in, right?
Yes, the Militarily Critical Technical Data Agreement. To receive or generate export controlled technical data under 5230.25, a contractor must submit a DD Form 2345 to the Joint Certification Program. That certification is what makes you a, quote, qualified U.S. contractor. Without an active, certified DD Form 2345, you are legally locked out of receiving CTI.
And once you're qualified, the actual documents you receive are marked with very specific distribution statements dictated by DoDI 5230.24. This is the letter system, statements A through F. and each letter carries a very precise legal definition of who the secondary audience can be.
Precisely. Let's look at the mechanics of these statements. Distribution statement A is easy. Approved for public release, distribution is unlimited. That's your press releases, your public research. But once you move to statement B, the circle shrinks. B is U.S. government agencies only. Statement C is U.S. government agencies and their contractors. Statement D is Department of Defense and U.S. DoD contractors only. Statement E is DoD components only, and Statement F is the most restrictive. Further distribution only as directed by the controlling office.
So, Statement D is basically the sweet spot for the defense industrial base. It allows sharing between the military and its contracted suppliers, but strictly bars anyone else.
Exactly. And under the modern CUI framework, these distribution statements are mapped directly to NARA's Limited Dissemination Controls, or LDCs. For example, distribution statement B maps to federal employees only, and statement C maps to federal employees and contractors only. If you see a document with distribution statement B, C, D, or E, it must also carry the mandatory export control warning specified in DoDD 5230.25 on the cover page.
So, we've got the policy hierarchy from the president to NARA and down to the Pentagon's distribution markings. But none of this has real teeth for a private company until it is written into a legally binding contract. And that's where the double tap of DFARS 252.204/7008 and DFARS 252.204-7012 comes into play.
This is the legal trigger. DFARS 252.204-7008 is the solicitation provision. By submitting an offer on a contract that contains this provision, the contractor is legally representing that they will implement the security requirements of NIST SP 800-171 in effect at the time of the solicitation. It is a pre-award promise.
And then DFARS 252.204-7012 is the actual contract clause that binds them during performance. It requires the contractor to provide adequate security on all covered contractor information systems that touch covered defense information, or CDI, which includes unclassified controlled technical information.
Right. And adequate security is explicitly defined as implementing the 110 security controls of NIST SP 800-171. But what happens if a contractor relies on the cloud? If they use an external cloud service provider to store or process this CUI, the rules get even tighter.
Oh, absolutely. The cloud requirements under paragraph B of the 7012 clause are incredibly strict. You can't just use any commercial off-the-shelf cloud. The clause mandate is that the external cloud service provider must meet security requirements equivalent to the FedRAMP moderate baseline.
Yes, FedRAMP moderate equivalency. And the contractor is responsible for ensuring the cloud provider also complies with the cyber incident reporting, media preservation, and forensic analysis access requirements of the clause. Speaking of reporting, if a contractor suffers a cyber incident on a covered system, they don't have days to sit on it. Paragraph C requires them to rapidly report the incident.
And rapidly report has a very specific, unforgiving definition within 72 hours of discovery.
72 hours. And you don't just email your contracting officer. You must submit the report to the DoD via the DIBnet portal at https://dibnet.dod.mil. To even access that portal and submit the report, the contractor must possess a DoD-approved Medium Assurance Certificate. If you don't have that certificate ready to go beforehand, you will fail to meet that 72-hour window.
That is a massive operational detail that a lot of folks overlook. And the reporting doesn't stop with a web form. Under paragraph E, if there's malicious software found in connection with the incident, you have to submit that malware directly to the DOHD Cybercrime Center, or DC3. Plus, you have to preserve and protect images of all known affected systems and all relevant monitoring data for at least 90 days from the submission of the report.
90 days of forensic preservation. That means packet captures, system logs, virtual machine images, all of it. If the DoD decides they want to conduct a forensic analysis or a damage assessment under paragraph F, the contractor must provide them with physical access to the equipment and all the preserved media. It's an incredibly intrusive process, but it is the law.
So, if you're a defense contractor, how do you actually survive an audit and stay compliant without losing your mind? Let's talk about the practical operational playbook. Step 1 has to be verification. You cannot protect what you don't know you have. And under DoDI 5248 and DFARS 7012, there is a very clear rule. The program office or requiring activity must identify CUI at the time of contract award.
Exactly. The burden of identification starts with the government. But as a contractor, you have to verify this on day one. You look at the contract's DD Form 254, or the Statement of Work, to see where CUI is identified. If the government sends you technical drawings with a Distribution Statement D, but didn't mark them as CUI, you have to raise your hand and get clarification immediately.
Once you have verified that you are holding CUI, you have to implement the physical and logical safeguards. Under DoDI 5248, you must establish a controlled environment. During work hours, that means minimizing the risk of unauthorized access, no leaving CUI technical drawings sitting on an empty desk. And after hours, it means locked drawers, locked cabinets, or secure facility access.
And on the digital side, the practices have to be ironclad. Number one, no personal email accounts. DoDI 5200.48 explicitly bans DoD personnel and contractors from using unofficial or personal email accounts like Gmail or Yahoo to conduct official business involving CUI. Every email containing CUI must be encrypted using approved methods like PKI or transport layer security.
That is a huge trap for subcontractors. Speaking of which, if you're a prime contractor, you have a massive legal obligation to flow these clauses down. Under DFARS 252.204-7012, you must include the clause in subcontracts, where subcontractor performance will involve covered defense information.
Yes, the flowdown is mandatory, and subcontractors have to notify the prime if they request any variances from the NIST SP 800-171 requirements, and they must share their DIBNet incident report number with the prime if they suffer a breach. But there's another operational risk that primes must monitor: the risk of data aggregation.
Ah, right. Aggregation or compilation. That's the concept where you take multiple pieces of unclassified CUI, and when you put them all together, the collective picture actually triggers a classification requirement.
Exactly. Under DoDI 5200.48, Section 3.8, if a contractor realizes that compiling unclassified data has generated classified information, they have to report it immediately to a DoD representative and lock down the data under classified standards. Finally, all of these operational practices, your access logs, your encryption policies, your subcontractor flowdown records, must be meticulously documented. With the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, coming down the pike, you won't just have to be compliant, you will have to prove it to a third-party assessor.
The administrative pyramid is tall, but when you look at the threat landscape, the security always posture isn't just a regulatory hurdle. It is the literal shield protecting the technological edge of the warfighter.
It is the shield, Eric. Mission first, security always. That's the only way forward.